Hello, good day to everyone. Sir Howard here. As always, I am here to share with you my psychological reflection on a biblical passage. This time, Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verses 7 to 9. Let me read. Light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. But let them remember the days of darkness, for there will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. You who are young, be happy while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. There are 4 insights na gusto kong i-share sa inyo from reading this passage. Number 1, I want to introduce you to a psychological activity called savoring. Ibig sabihin ng savoring, ang keyword dito is you appreciate small things in life. Tayong mga tao kasi, we have a tendency to just celebrate or to appreciate big things that happen to us. You only celebrate kapag tumaas ang sweldo mo, or na-promote ka, or may nabili kang mamahalin, or nakapunta ka sa dream country mo. Well, it's not bad to celebrate on great things, especially when you thank God for these great things. But what the author is teaching us here in Ecclesiastes 11:7 to 9 is we need to learn how to appreciate the small things. Like for example, in the passage, verse 7, ano yung mga bagay na maliliit that the author celebrated or the author appreciated? Number 1 is light or seeing the sun. Seemingly mga maliliit na bagay yan, di ba? In-appreciate dito ng author yung idea na meron siyang light na nakikita at meron pa siyang ability to see the sun. Now, how many of us every day in the morning, habit natin yan? We wake up, we see the sun, we see the light of the day, and we thank God for it. Kung iisipin mo, pwede namang hindi na nangyari yun eh. Kung iisipin mo, pwedeng on your sleep, namatay ka na. Or habang natutulog ka, sumabog yung araw, nabalitaan mo na lang forever na tayong madilim at malamig. Diba? Seemingly small things. You have the ability to see the light and the sun. We need to thank God for it. We need to appreciate these small things. Na-appreciate mo ba na wala kang light bill? Hindi ka pinapadala ni God ng light bill, pambayad mo sa sunlight. We need to appreciate those small things. Another thing that the writer appreciated in this passage is yung years. Sabi sa verse 8, how many or however many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. Ano raw yung years na dapat mong i-enjoy? Keyword here is all. All years na meron ka, dapat mong i-enjoy, dapat mong i-appreciate. Again, human beings, we have the tendency to categorize our years into 2. We have good years and we have bad years. Good years are years where tumaas yung sweldo natin, nakapunta tayo sa dream country natin, or nakabili tayo ng mamahaling kotse. Wow, good year. Ano yung mga bad years natin? Bad years are those years na wala masyadong nangyari. Wala tayong masyadong nakuha. Wala tayong masyadong nabili. Wala masyadong happenings. But biblically speaking, it is wrong for us to call a year a bad year. And one way for you to convince yourself that nothing is a bad year is pili ka ng isang bad year mo and appreciate that bad year in the most basic level. That bad year that you're talking about is a year where you survive 365 days. Doon pa lang dapat hindi na siya bad year. 365 days kang nagising. 365 days kang walang masamang nangyari sa'yo. Wala kang matinding sakit. In that bad year, that is already reason enough for you to stop calling it a bad year. Kaya nga, if you're going to follow verse 7 here, or verse 7 to 8, there's no such thing as a bad year. As long as you have years given to you by God, all those years are good years. Again, yan yung tinatawag nating savoring, appreciating the small things. Now, savoring is a very popular concept in psychology. In fact, marami ng mga libro, no? Marami ng mga libro ang naisulat on savoring. Like for example, this book by Bryant and Veroff. Not only books, marami ring mga researches ang nagawa on savoring. In fact, I would say the area of research on savoring is a busy one. Halos every month, halos every year, many researches are being added in the area of savoring. Now, there are many interesting things that we know about savoring, but if there's one thing na talagang sa tingin ko nag-i-stand out and I think can benefit all of us, according to studies, savoring leads to happiness. The more a person savors, the more we appreciate small things, the more we are contributing to our own happiness. Kaya yung mga malulungkot dyan, yung mga depressed dyan, why don't you try this? Gawin mong therapy yung savoring. Every day in the morning when you wake up, or even before you go to sleep, you appreciate the small things that happen to you. According to studies, it will do great things in your psychological life. In the Bible, there is this one character na sa tingin ko, naging habit na niya yung savoring. King David. In one of his psalms, pinakita niya kung paano siya mag-savor. Sabi niya sa 118 verse 24, "This is the day which the Lord had made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." Ano ang sinasavor dito ni David? The day. Nagising siya, na-realize niya he has another day, he is still alive. That is reason enough for him to be glad in it. Small things matter. Small things must be appreciated. Hindi lang yung mga malalaki. The more you appreciate the small things, the greater your happiness becomes. So sana maging habit din natin yan. Again, who you call that? Savoring. Let's move on to number 2. Second insight that I realize after reading the passage is we are wired for happiness. We can see that in verse 9, first part. Going back to Ecclesiastes, sabi dito, "You who are young, be happy while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth." That is a direct command. Nung sinabihan tayo na let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Now, don't think na ang youth lang ang sinasabi dito. It's just that the reason why may special emphasis ang youth dyan, yung mga bata, it's because it is during youth that our body is the most energetic. Doon tayo may pinakamaraming resources and strength na paligayahin natin yung mga sarili natin. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na kapag matanda ka na, hindi ka na pwedeng maging masaya. Okay? Now, I think the author wrote this statement because as human beings, many times in our life, we forget to be happy. We forget that we are wired by God to be happy. Kasi sa buhay natin, especially in our culture, we are being convinced that we don't deserve to be happy. We are being convinced that we need to earn more money than be happy. Magparami ka nang muna ng pera. Kapag dumami na yung pera mo, doon ka magiging masaya. Therefore, kung konti lang ang pera mo, wala kang karapatan para maging masaya. That is a very flawed model of happiness. Because the correct model of happiness is as long as you are alive, as long as you are here on earth, you need to be happy because God designed you to be happy. Biblical basis for saying that, Garden of Eden. If you are going to read the account of the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis, mapapansin natin, marirealize natin that God intended human beings to be happy. Basahin mo kung ano yung mga bagay na makikita natin in the Garden of Eden while Adam and Eve were on it. God gave us the raw materials in the Garden of Eden to be happy. You name it. Meron silang food, meron silang security, meron silang companionship with the animals. In the language of psychology, all the hierarchy of needs that Abraham Maslow said or identified na sa Garden of Eden, which tells us that God, very clear indication that God wanted human beings to be happy in the Garden of Eden. Kaya hindi natin dapat kakalimutan yan. As long as we are alive, one thing that we need to remember every day is God wants us to be happy. Number 3, in connection to number 2, very related ito sa number 2. Meron tayong tinatawag na biblical enjoyment. Sabi sa number 2, kinakailangan natin maging masaya, therefore, it is okay for us to enjoy. Pero dapat yung enjoyment natin, biblical enjoyment. We can see biblical enjoyment in the second part of verse 9. Verse 9b. Balik tayo. You who are young and be happy while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Yun yung first part. Second part, follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. But, look at that but know that all these things, for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Ang ibig sabihin ng biblical enjoyment, you are enjoying life, you are giving yourself pleasure while you are being aware that God is watching you. Habang nagsasaya ka, habang nag-enjoy ka sa buhay, again, which is not bad, God wants you to be happy, but dapat, habang ginagawa mo yung mga bagay na yon, you are constantly thinking about God. You are aware that God is watching you, making yourself happy. Bakit? Bakit ba mahalaga na habang nagsasaya ka, you are constantly aware of God? Because it will protect you from what we call earthly enjoyment, makamundong pagsasaya, which is not good for our psyche. It leads you to depression, it leads you to sin, it leads you to the destruction of yourself or even your relationship with other people. Karamihan kasi ng mga enjoyment na tinuturo sa atin ng mundo nakakasira ng sarili, pati relationship with other people. When you get drunk, when you engage into selfishness, nagnanakaw ka, bumibili ka ng mga bagay na wala na sa logic, uncontrollable na yung spending habits mo, those are the things that will really destroy your life. That's earthly enjoyment. So para hindi mangyari yung earthly enjoyment, habang nagsasaya ka, you need to be aware that God is watching you. Biblical enjoyment ang tawag doon. One example of earthly enjoyment, may isang author nagsabi, no? Paano raw dapat ang mag-enjoy? And I don't recommend this. Ang sabi, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Walang ano dito, awareness of God. You just eat, go ahead. Drink, go ahead. Be merry, go ahead. There's no God. The most important thing, pasayahin mo sarili mo, that's it. That's the point of life. That is a very wrong model of happiness. We need to be enjoying life in accordance or with the idea that God is watching us. Again, ang tawag doon is biblical enjoyment. We need to protect ourselves from earthly enjoyment through biblical enjoyment. Last one, number 4, the fourth insight that I got from reading the passage is, I want to introduce to you another psychological concept called transcendental future time perspective, or TFTP for short. Anong ibig sabihin ng TFTP? This is your overall awareness of life after death. Gaano kadalas mong iniisip ano mangyayari sa spirito mo after your body dies? The more you think about these issues, whether you're going to heaven or hell, anong itsura ng eternity, anong gagawin mo sa heaven, the more you think about these things, mataas ang TFTP mo. Kapag mababa ang TFTP mo, ibig sabihin, hindi mo masyadong iniisip yan. Your focus is only here on earth. What will happen to you after you die? Yung TFTP na yan na sinasabi natin dito can be found again in verse 9, second part. But know, for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Kapag iniisip mo ano mangyayari sa judgment ng iyong spirit, then that means you are practicing TFTP. Now, is TFTP good for our psyche? The answer is yes. There are many researches na nagpapatunay that those people high in TFTP enjoy positive psychological outcomes. Halimbawa, in the study by Zimbardo and Boyd, nireview nila yung maraming mga pag-aaral on the benefits of TFTP in our minds at napag-alaman nila that people who constantly think of their life after death, marami silang mga positive outcomes that they experience, such as they they are more aware of values, they practice their values. In other words, kung i-combine ko yung dalawang outcomes na yan, ang mga tao na mataas ang TFTP ay bumabait. It pushes them to do good behaviors. It pushes them to be good to other people, which I think is very good for our psychological life. Our psyche by nature is being enhanced, lumalakas, kapag pinapaligiran natin yung sarili natin ng goodness. But how do you improve or how do you motivate yourself to be a good person? By being aware what may possibly happen to you in the future, especially after your death. Kaya in the Bible, marami mga passages nagpapaalala sa atin that there is life after death. Pinapataas yung ating TFTP. One good example of that passage, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 14. Ang sinasabi doon, pag nabasa mo ito, talagang tataas ang TFTP mo eh. Yan. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. If this passage is constantly in your head, no wonder talaga namang mapupush mo yung sarili mo to do good things. Hindi ka manlalamang ng kapwa, magiging honest ka sa ibang tao, 'di ba? Hindi ka magnanakaw, so on and so forth. And again, paano ka babait? Bakit ka nagiging mabait? Because you are aware that there is life after death. After everything that I've discussed so far about this passage, let me close this video with 3 applications. Ano yung mga pwede nating matutunan for today? Number 1, I hope you realize that we really need to make savoring our habit. Huwag nating ini-snub yung mga bagay na maliliit. We appreciate even the smallest things that we are enjoying in our life today. Yung paghinga mo, yung sumikat pa yung araw, yung nakakapagbayad ka pa ng electric bill mo, yung wala kang sakit. Madalas kasi, we don't see these things. We take these things for granted. That is not the way to go. If you want to make yourself happier, you learn to appreciate the small things. That's number 1. Number 2, in relation to number 1, one good effect na mararanasan mo if you follow application number 1 is, number 2, magiging happy ka. Be happy. Diba? In relation to number 1, savoring makes you happy. Therefore, every day, one of your priorities is to be happy. Hindi masama ang maging masaya, basta ang tatandaan mo lang, while you are being happy, while you are enjoying yourself, while you are experiencing pleasure, wag mo lang tatanggalin sa utak mo yung idea of God. We can enjoy life. We can have clean fun. God wants us to enjoy life. God wants us to have clean fun. Wag ka lang magiging obsessed in loving the world, kasi yun yung danger eh. 'Di ba? Ang danger kapag masyado ka nang nag-e-enjoy sa mundo, you have a tendency to fall in love with the world. Now, that is the kind of happiness that God does not want you to have. Sabi nga niya, 1 John 2:15. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. It's okay to enjoy the world. It's okay to have pleasure from this world, but with the awareness of God. Huwag kang magpo-fall in love sa mundo. Maging masaya ka, but don't fall in love with the world. How do you prevent that from happening? Tulad nga na sinabi ko kanina, while you are enjoying the world, while you are being happy, while you are giving yourself pleasure, be aware that God is watching you. And number 3, last one, another application that we need to do is everyday thoughts about God and the afterlife is good. Many people, iniiwasan nila yung mga ganyang thoughts. They don't like to think about God. They don't like to think about life after death kasi para sa kanila, natatakot sila. Hindi dapat. In fact, the more you think about God, the more you think about your life after death, the more you think about what will happen to you after you die, the more you are becoming a better person. Kasi napapaalalahanan ka na dapat yung mga ginagawa mo sa buhay kontrolado. Yung mga ginagawa mo sa buhay magaganda. Yung mga ginagawa mo sa buhay mabubuti. And one way for you to really push yourself to be a good person, to do good things, to do good works, is to remind yourself that one day you are going to see God and you will be accountable to everything that you have done here on earth. So that ends our psychological reflection on Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verses 7 to 9. I hope you learned something. Thank you for listening. Until next time.